Hello, everyone, and welcome into episode 163 of the Stomp the Bus Show. I'm your host, Mark Harris, and we have a lot to get into. ASU basketball is making moves. The NFL draft is a few days away, and potentially two Sun Devils will go in the first round. ASU baseball is going. ASU women's basketball is, I believe, has completed their portal haul. So a lot of moving parts. And there's a lot to get into. Before I do, please like and subscribe on YouTube. Please rate and review on your podcast platform of choice. And let's dive into it. So, I've started the show on a fairly kind of positive tone, if you listen. But before I dive into all the kind of news bits and headlines and share my thoughts, uh, we have to address the passing of Stephen Miller. And Stephen Miller was a former ASU offensive lineman. He played for ASU from 2015 to 2019. I believe he started the last 2 years, and after that, I'm pretty sure he followed Billy Napier to Florida or joined the Florida staff for a bit, but then came back and has since been a very big part of the coaching staff and was someone who players could really connect with, especially like players who were coming in new. He was just very nice guy, and it's just a tragedy what happened. And I don't really know exactly how he died. There might be other podcasts out there that can speak on that with a little bit more authority. I don't really want to speculate. But it's just, I don't know. This sometimes when people pass away, they hit a little bit differently. And for me, this kind of hits differently because Stephen Miller was someone who I wouldn't say I knew him, but I was definitely like in kind of his orbit. I would say I had a finance class with him at ASU. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that I was chumming it up with him in the back of the class or whatever. Like that's not true, but he was in the class. Like he was someone who you would see around. He in college, like I knew some of the ASU offensive linemen through Colton, actually, our former co-host, and like sometimes Stephen Miller would be around with them, and like it's a very close to home death, and I think that I don't really have any profound words of wisdom about that. It's just it kind of hits closer to home for me, and it's it's just tough when someone so young passes away and someone who was such a valued member of the ASU community. And by when I say ASU community, I mean ASU. I don't mean ASU football. Um, so and he clearly had a big effect on all the players, right? Like there was believe a story went around that like they just had like 30 guys, once the death was kind of official, like 30 guys that kind of 30 plus guys like that just all kind of congregated at, I believe it was Derek Eusebio's house with Jaron Hamilton cooking breakfast for everyone. And it's just, I'm glad this team has this kind of bond, but it's also really unfortunate that it has to be tested like that. Um, and I mean, it again, like just to have someone pass away that young it's just extremely unfortunate. There's not really much else I can say, and it's just, I want to just give Stephen Miller the proper respect that he deserves, and it's just it's a real bummer, and it's just a real kind of window into how short or just how your time on this earth can come to an end at an unexpected moment and quicker than you think. And unfortunately, like that's the case with Stephen Miller. And so I know that there's plenty of people that have reached out about it. I've tweeted about it on my like it's not that he hasn't gotten any attention. It's just it's been 10 days since I last recorded, and I just wanted to really give Stephen Miller his due as a good Sun Devil, just as a good person, more importantly. And I think it's very telling, just the outpouring of respect and positivity that flowed toward him, or toward his memory after his death. And it's just it sucks, there's no real way around that. And I hope the players can kind of, I don't want to say like galvanize behind it, because I think that's kind of hollow and cheap to say that. I just hope, just personally, they can just recover from it and just I don't want to say accept it, but they can they can just I don't want to say anything that's like, oh, they just need to forget about it and move on, because that's not it at all. I just I don't know. I guess just kind of deal with it in a constructive way. So that's really like, I just wanted to take some time to shout out Stephen Miller, man. Like he was a big part of the ASU community. Like he's someone who could have been like a head coach down the line, if he reached later ages, and unfortunately that won't happen. So rest in peace, Stephen Miller. I literally, I've never heard anyone say a bad thing about you in like the social interactions. I don't want to call it that, just kind of social orbit that we were in at certain points in college. Like, no, it was, everyone had good things to say about him, and it's a real tragedy that he passed away so young. And so, I just hope his memory is not forgotten. And I think it's just a real tragedy, and I hope everyone can kind of recover from it while also remembering the great person that Stephen Miller was. So I just wanted to start with that. There's obviously more sports things to get into, but I just think it has to be noted, just since I haven't recorded since his passing. So once again, rest in peace, Stephen Miller. You will not be forgotten. And it's an unfortunate tragedy. So, all right, going to move on from that now. And after, obviously that's a, difficult thing to talk about, but other things have happened, including the addition of Paulius Murauskas to ASU men's basketball. This is such an important addition. I cannot stress, and it was kind of a weird saga that came with it, because there were a lot of smoke and predictions about Paulius Murauskas coming to ASU. And obviously, eventually it did happen on Tuesday. But I was just a little bit stressed about it, because it took a little bit too long to officially materialize. Well, it's happened. He is following Randy Bennett from St. Mary's to Arizona State. This is the headliner of ASU's transfer portal class, which, by the way, on 24/7 ranks 9th in all of men's college basketball, because you also get the addition of Joel Foxwell, along with the previous additions of Nate Garcia and Marcus Vaughns. And what I do think is interesting, obviously Paulius Murauskas gets a ton of pub, 6'8", 235. He averaged 18.4 points per game and 7.6 rebounds on 48% shooting for St. Mary's. Not a perfect player, had a bad game against Texas A&M in the tournament, but against Santa Clara, he had 26. just a lot of just double-digit games throughout his season this past year. And, you know, 19 points against Virginia Tech, 24 against Vanderbilt, a team that made the tournament, 21 against Boise State, kind of a tournament adjacent team. And against, teams in 15 and Gonzaga, he didn't quite play as well. So this like, he's probably not going to be any sort of like All-American or like I don't know if we'll hear his name come up in NBA draft discussions, but to me, all of that is just to the side. This he was the number 9 player in the portal. He was like, if you look at the Post, it's a lot of Louisville fans and Kentucky fans that are just upset that they didn't get him. So we can nitpick at his individual performances here and there, and that's fine. Like I think that's worth doing, I guess, but the fact that other big time schools wanted him and ASU was able to get him, and likely, like, we don't know how much money he's getting paid. I'm sure that other schools could have offered him more, but the fact that he has the connection with Randy Bennett, and trust Randy Bennett's basketball acumen enough to be like, yeah, you know what, I'm going to ASU. So I just think it's a good, it's just a good addition for ASU. There's no, I like it, and I'm struggling to speak. Oh boy, nap did me in. I had this tweet from the main account. It's actually getting some traction. It reads, "It's a big deal that ASU landed Paulius Murauskas. The program needed a headliner to kick off the Randy Bennett era. His interior scoring will make things easier on everyone else. Plus, it's nice to have a high-profile transfer, something that hasn't happened in men's basketball yet, for ASU men's basketball." And I think that last line is really important. Like, ASU football has had some high-profile transfers, especially this past cycle, right? The Reed Harrises, Omarion Millers, and I'll talk about those two later in this show. And then Owen Long. Like, those were legit guys that a lot of people wanted. That really hasn't been the case with ASU men's basketball. Maybe you could argue like the Cambridge brothers in 2022. You could argue like Warren Washington, but those guys were not as well known as Paulius Murauskas, and they were not as coveted by other larger basketball brands as Murauskas was. And so now you have him locked in, and you have kind of a main, just best player that you can build around. And then you just shift your focus to the rest of the transfer guys. Joe Foxwell, he kind of flew under the radar because his recruitment was much less drawn out, honestly. But this guy was a freshman again at Portland, but he averaged 15.6 points, 6.5 assists, and his 6.5 assists 14th in the country, and 4.3 rebounds per game. Foxwell is a good addition, and he's a 4-star, right, on 24/7. Emmanuel Innocente from Gonzaga, not the great scoring guard, but a great defender, and there's a reason he was at Gonzaga, so he's a good pickup. Vaughns, you don't really have as much of a feel with him because he didn't play much at LSU, but I think it's notable that he's an 88 in the transfer rankings despite not playing last year. 6'8", 221, like he has the frame. And then Nate Garcia from Cal Baptist, he's got the size, played very little at Cal Baptist. This one I don't really have as much of a feel on. But again, he is 7 feet tall, and so, you'll take that. So, and outgoing transfers, most guys have left. I see Cash Polk is going to Jacksonville State, Marcus Adams to Hawaii, and Noah Mayusin to Paul. I also really like that Bryce Ford is staying for a few reasons. One, he was just a pretty good player for ASU last year. He wasn't great by any means, but for someone who had played at Toledo and you didn't really know what you were getting, 7 points per game with his, role was pretty good. And he kind of just looked the part. I felt pretty good when he was on the floor. He was a pretty good shooter. It felt like, even though he only shot 31% from three. So, but uh, yeah, he was at Toledo, then at ASU, missed some time, and you kind of felt when he was out as well. So, he wasn't, again, like Bryce Ford was not some elite player, but he was also just like a good guy to have on the team, and I'm glad he's back. And additionally, like, it's kind of cool that you have someone who's from Arizona on the team, like, it's almost rare that happens. A guy who's uh a kid from Scottsdale, went to Pinnacle, and like he's just plays at ASU basketball. Like, I feel like that's a thing of the past at this point. So we'll see what else ASU men's basketball does, right? There's rumors around Dillan Shaw. He would be a great guy to add. And I do think the addition of Paulius Murauskas kind of legitimizes the Randy Bennett era a bit more. Like, you had the addition of Rick Croy as assistant coach, coming as a head coach. You have his son, J. Rob Croy, as a 4-star recruit. And so, like, the program feels more solid now, but you really needed that cherry on top. I shouldn't say cherry on top. You really needed that just headliner, that main entree, to really get things going. And I think Paulius Murauskas, maybe not the perfect guy, but he was the perfect guy for ASU standards. Like, all these other main, what? Let's look at the top portal commit or transfer portal guys, because, like, again, he was 9th in the 24/7 portal rankings, but like none of these other guys were going to schools like ASU. Maybe you could argue Providence, but I wouldn't say that. I think they're just more committed. You look like it's either just basketball schools or schools with way larger budgets. So you have Floyd Badunga to Louisville, Milan Momcilovic, we don't know. Blackwell to Duke, that was today. Graves, we don't know. Jop, he's either going to Gonzaga or St. John's. PJ Haggerty, K-State to A&M. And then Texas, but then you get him to ASU, and like you look even lower, it's Texas, Illinois, St. John's, Indiana, Louisville, Tennessee. So maybe you get to Miami and then it changes. But like, my point with this is we weren't landing any of these other guys in the top group. I mean, when you go down to Foxwell, like, there's a long way to go before you get to Joel Foxwell, and I can't even find. Okay, here we go. Yeah, Joel. Yeah, this proves my point. Joel Foxwell is the 105th best portal player. So it's great that you got Joel Foxwell, but he couldn't have been the best guy that you have gotten. And Paulius Murauskas was the guy you needed, because you weren't going to get anyone else. Dillan Shaw is also a 4-star. So if you can get him, that would be great. No real word on him. Maybe him and another big man, and then you're kind of, I don't want to say you're set, but you can start to really feel what a lineup could be like. And I don't know. I'm just very happy this went through. I'm very happy that Randy Bennett kind of health issues haven't prevented anything concrete. And I mean, this is just a good place to be. There has to be some amount more investment there. I don't want to speculate too much on that. I mean, they still lost Jop, and like, it's not like it's it's not like it's we're overloaded with cash and we're just buying everyone in the portal. Like, that's not true either. But I just think that getting a guy like Paulius Murauskas, as a fan, you can just go into next year feeling so much more confident that you're going to get a solid basketball product on a fairly regular basis with a guy like Paulius Murauskas in the fold. That's kind of how I feel. So it's just a good place to be. It's not perfect, it's not like we're getting everyone and we have all this great talent and waiting in the wings. Like this team is not going to be like a contender to win the Big 12 conference, but I feel like making the tournament is a way more likely outcome now with Paulius Murauskas than it was without him, and with Foxwell versus without him. So let's hope they can get Dillan Shaw. Let's hope they can get a big, maybe a few more rotation guys, and then the roster looks a lot better. All right, I'm going to shout out women's basketball real quick. So they added a portal. They got Ruby Whitehorn, Iheanachor, Sarai Darrington, Madison Morrison, Ella Ryan, and Rashunda Jones. Rashunda Jones was a big pickup for them. This is an interesting quote or a graphic they have on the Sun Devil women's basketball account. It's a lot of praise, and I mean, even FanDuel, that's crazy. It's crazy how much pub Molly Miller has gotten, but like it seems like they're just picking up where they left off, and London Parker and Avery Lower are good high school additions coming up, and you kept McKenna Brackens and Helosa Carrera, just a lot of good news with the women's basketball program as well. So I just wanted to make sure I shouted them out in addition to men's basketball. All right, ASU football. This isn't the post I was thinking. So do I start? I'm going to start with NFL draft stuff. I think that's a little bit more on the nose. It looks like there's going to be 4 ASU players selected in this upcoming NFL draft: Jordyn Tyson, Iheanachor, Keith Abney, and Keyshawn Elliott. After that, a 5th player getting selected would probably come in the 7th round, and it would be a mix, like a Miles Rouser, maybe a Xavier Alford, although I don't know about that quite as much, but potentially a Shimon Mateer, maybe a Justin Wiley. I don't I think there's a chance that they get 5, but I would be almost certain that it's just going to be 4 guys, which I don't know. I don't want to say that's disappointing. It kind of depends on how it goes. But that's kind of where we're looking at right now. Jordyn Tyson is suddenly not injury prone now. I don't know if you've heard, after he had one workout and showed the clip of him kind of levitating in the air for a little bit, which was very impressive out in Tempe. And so after all this, and of course the New York Giants trading Dexter Lawrence to the Bengals for the 10th overall pick, it seems very, very likely that Jordyn Tyson is going to go in the top 10. And if he doesn't go in the top 10, he won't make it. If he is on the board at 13 for the Los Angeles Rams, I would be stunned if they don't take him. And as a Seahawks fan, I would be so annoyed that they got him, because it seems like they could easily draft a receiver there, and I don't want him on the Rams. I don't. But anyway, so there's a lot of mock drafts out there, and I don't want to just pick on one. So what I did was I found an NFL draft consensus from For the Win. And I want to shout out Charles Curtis for putting this together. So for those who are listening on podcasts, it's NFL draft week. Let's go. That's right. NFL draft is about to be upon us with mock drafts everywhere as we prepare for the real thing on Thursday night. So it's time to once again round up the experts around the internet. Who are they picking to go where? We do this every year, and we're doing it again. We take a bunch of mocks. The list of mocks we used is below. Then we look at the picks each made and average out each player's positions and match them to each of the first 32 picks in the first round. Anyone left out of a first round mock was assigned the 33rd pick. So they got For the Win, USA Today, ESPN, NFL.com, CBS.com, Yahoo. So it's a pretty big selection. There's obviously way more mock drafts out there. And unsurprisingly, it's Fernando Mendoza going to the Raiders at 1. They have David Bailey going to the Jets at 2. I feel like it's more likely going to be Arvell Reese, but Cardinals with Arvell Reese. They have Jeremiah Love falling to the Giants. So I don't really. This is weird. It seems like this is more just the averages, and so that can kind of mess up where like the individual players go. But as this stands, they have Jordyn Tyson going to the Dolphins at 11, and then again Max Iheanachor going to the Bears at 5. And I think it's really interesting. So I would actually don't expect either of those players to go to those individual teams. I've seen a lot of buzz of Iheanachor to the 49ers and Texans in the late first round. And then there's so much. It feels most likely that Tyson goes in the 8 to 10 range, whether that's to the Saints at 8, potentially the Chiefs at 9, or the Giants at 10. And that would be something like that, with Tyson going top 10 and then Iheanachor getting picked in the first round, would just be so awesome for ASU football. It really would. And again, I think it would be one of the biggest just individual days of the Dillingham era. And when you listen to these younger players, these transfers who come to ASU, the wide receivers, like sometimes they'll say, "Oh, I saw what happened with Jordyn Tyson." Like, if you can have that with Max Iheanachor as well, then you can recruit offensive linemen better, and that is so important because like there's just fewer really good offensive linemen out there, and it's just a more premium position, which is why the fact that it's such a premium position, it really helps Max Iheanachor, because if he were there's a lot of lists out here that have him as like OT7 behind the 2 Utah guys, Francis Mauigoa of Miami, Monroe Freeling from Georgia, Blake Miller from Clemson, and then Caden Proctor from Alabama. Now, some might have Iheanachor higher than that, but let's just do it according to this consensus mock draft. Lomu is ahead of him. Proctor is ahead of him. Monroe Freeling is ahead of him, so that's 3. Fano is ahead of him, so that's 4. And then Mauigoa is ahead of him, 7th overall, so that's 5. And then I guess I don't know what they're doing with Blake Miller. It's just Blake Miller. Oh no, it's Peter Woods. Okay, so Blake Miller is below. So this one has Iheanachor as the 6th, as OT6. So either way, he's either OT6 or OT7, according to most mocks. And while for a lot of positions, like some might have Keith Abney as cornerback 6 or 7, or Keyshawn Elliott as linebacker 6 or 7, but that pushes you down because those positions aren't quite as rare. Although maybe corner, that doesn't quite apply. But for like Keyshawn Elliott, for example, if Keyshawn Elliott and Max Iheanachor are both considered the 7th best player at their respective position entering the draft, that means Keyshawn Elliott's going like 3rd round at best, and Iheanachor is a 1st round pick just due to the position that he plays. So anyway, I think this is good. Like, well, obviously, like being a 1st round pick is good, but like I think it's good for Iheanachor that like if you're going in the back half of the 1st round, obviously you want to go higher, but like you're going to a better team, right? If he's going to the Niners, like that's going to help him just fit in with Kyle Shanahan's system. Or if he's going to the Texans, like he's going to be on a team that's a good team. You could say that if he goes to the Bears, whatever it is, right? Like, and ultimately, like this is a guy who didn't play football at all in high school. He played at East Los Angeles Junior College. He had to start in the 2023 season because our offensive line got absolutely shredded by injuries. And then he stacked 2 really good seasons in 24 and 25. And like for a guy who did not play high school football, this is an incredible development story. And Saga Tuitele, ASU's offensive line coach, really like this is a huge win for him, an enormous win. And if you can say, hey, I developed Max Iheanachor and I can develop, offensive lineman X, like there's some proof in the pudding with that if he goes in the first round. So I wanted to shout those 2 guys out. Tyson, I haven't gone crazy into the Tyson, like the volatility of where like, oh, is he going to fall out of the first round, which was complete nonsense to begin to even have that topic. But there was real fear that he would slide in the draft. And I think if you solely base it off injuries, I don't really disagree. But I think with Tyson, like I would be surprised if he makes it to the Jets at 16, I would be surprised. That would be my take heading into the draft. And honestly, like I think he's going to be wide receiver 2, and he's probably going to go to the Giants at 10. Like that just feels like the most likely outcome. It feels like Carnell Tate goes to the Browns at 7, and it's either Tyson at 8 or Tyson at 10. And if he doesn't go to 10, then someone else will, so I think you see people sharing his highlights more often. Like it's just much more, he's just much more present on social media, and people are just kind of seeing the highlights and being like, oh, this guy is incredible. And, obviously you don't have to tell me that, but some people need a reminder. So as for Keith Abney and Keyshawn Elliott, I'm really hoping Keith Abney can go in the second round. I've seen him kind of like in the 60s range. So that means he could go back into the second round or early third round. The potential of having 3 guys in the first 2 rounds for ASU football would be incredible. And that would also, again, help the program development, especially like Keith Abney is one of the guys, like he is just a recruit, right? He is not like, Iheanachor was from JUCO. Jordyn Tyson was at Colorado. Keyshawn Elliott was at New Mexico State, right? Like they did a great job of identifying those talents over the years, but Keith Abney was just a high school recruit. And that's a good thing to see as well. Especially coming out after his 3rd year, like you want him to be rewarded with the highest possible amount of money he can get. And so, look, as a Seahawks fan, if we took Keith Abney at 64 overall, I would be thrilled. That would be awesome. Seahawks are going to do all sorts of crazy trades, so I don't know how that's going to work out, but like that would be great. And so I'm not really worried like too much about Keith Abney. Like he's a big enough dude. He's not like the most elite athlete in the world, but I really doubt that. I don't think he makes it to the 3rd round. And then Keyshawn Elliott, if he can go in the 3rd round, that would be great. I would expect him to go relatively early in the 4th round if he doesn't. But he's going to get drafted. And like, I don't know, with Keyshawn Elliott, like that dude was so good these past 2 years. And, I think ASU's linebacking core is pretty good with Owen Long, Martell Hughes, and Cyrus Viaseu. But man, like I'm glad they got Owen Long because otherwise they would really miss Keyshawn Elliott, I guess is kind of what I'm getting to. So with those 4, like we could be done with ASU players getting called early in the 4th round potentially. So we'll see if Miles Rouser can sneak into the 7th round. If you can get 5 draft picks, that would be great. That would be such a stamp of approval for ASU football. And I mean, you get 2 first rounders. Like now, I want to say like not many schools do that, but there's going to be like Miami is probably going to have 3 first rounders. Tennessee might have 2 first round corners. Texas A&M has a chance to have 2 first rounders. Utah has the 2 tackles, could be in the first 2 rounds. If Ty Simpson goes in the first round, then Bama could have 2 first rounders. Clemson is going to have a bunch of guys in the first round. Ohio State's going to have 4 guys picked in the freaking top 10 with Reese, Downs, Tate, and Styles, and then potentially Caden McDonald later in the draft. Like it's very interesting how so much of the talent is like clustered up, but it's awesome that ASU is one of those teams that like is putting two different positions in into the first round, most likely. So there's a chance Iheanachor, sorry, slides out of the first round. That would be slightly disappointing, but I don't see it happening because just due to his the fact that he plays tackle and just the positional value of that. So those are my draft thoughts. We'll see what happens at the 7th round ish. If another guy gets called, I'm hoping someone does. I feel like Miles Rouser is good enough. I feel like honestly, I just think Shimon Mateer is good enough, but he probably doesn't have the receptions to justify that. We'll see. Teams kind of do whatever they want in the 7th round, so that's another thing to consider. But that's the end of draft talk for now. Now to spring football. So I attended the open practice on Saturday night, and shout out to ASU for having open practices. That's so cool, and you kind of get a close up of. I don't want to be too definitive with what I say here because like you can't see everything with where you're at, and it's a practice, and like there's all sorts of different variables. But I will say this. The main thing that stood out to me is that Reed Harris and Omarion Miller were good additions to bring in. They were not lemons. Reed Harris just his fluidity and movement impressed me. Obviously, like we know he's going to be able to do the jump catches, right? Go and moss someone. But I was impressed by his overall skill set as a receiver. And if you've seen any, reporters at camp, like they confirmed the same thing. And Omarion Miller, like he was much like thicker than I expected, and he has great ball skills and just he's gonna be tough to bring down. And man, like that's a tough ask for defenses to have to stop those two. In addition to Raiden Vinesbright, who wasn't practicing on Saturday, but like Jalen Moss looked pretty good. Jaron Hamilton looked pretty good. So you have those guys. Running backs look great. Carde Mack, wow. Carde Mack looks good. Man Robinson looks good. I'm not worried about running back at all. Quarterbacks like Cutter Boley looked pretty good, and Jake Fetty looked pretty good. I will say with Fetty, like he was bigger than I expected him to be. I expected Jake Fetty to be much more diminutive just as a person, and I didn't see that at all. And so what's great is that like I would feel comfortable with either Boley or Fetty starting this year, and that's a great place to be. Secondary looks good. I am excited to see this secondary. If you can roll out whether it's 4 or 5 guys, if you have this Ashton Stamps guy we got from LSU is legit at corner. We already have Rodney Bimmage, so that's the corners are good. Joseph Smith, I liked him as well. Montana Warren obviously is a good player. Lyric Rawls from Kansas, that dude is good. He like just a heat-seeking missile back there. And then Josiah McGrew, who I think is the most underrated portal addition that we got. You can see why he had so much production at FIU, and he's a much bigger dude than you think. So I like that. Tight ends, nothing crazy. AJ Ia didn't. We know how good AJ Ia can be, and so I'm not. I didn't see much on that specific practice. Christian Ingman from Portland State, he was bigger than I expected him to be, and he looked good. Linebackers, I mentioned, not worried about that at all. Defensive line, there's some question marks, but I just feel good about the players that are there in terms of answering those questions. CJ Fight didn't practice. Clayton Smith, he looks good, and again, like this is the benefit of getting Clayton Smith back for another year. You compare him with Jalen Thompson from Michigan State on the other edge, and all of a sudden, like that's a pretty good group of edges right there. And the other guy, Michael Gardner, who didn't play last year due to injury, the transfer from Oregon. I think if I were to pin a starting 4 defensive line for Week 1 or against Texas A&M or whomever, it would be Smith, Fight, Michael Gardner, and Jalen Thompson as the main 4, and then you add in like the Zach Swansons and the Jeffrey Manns, from JUCO, and Marion Winston, Albert Smith. Like, I don't think the defensive line is going to get quite as much. It doesn't quite have the star power, but I think once you dig under the hood or open under the hood, I guess, like, you can kind of see that, like, okay, like, yeah, they don't have like the star power, but they have some guys, and that's encouraging. Offensive line, I think they're a pretty good run blocking offensive line. I think they're solid enough passing. It's kind of weird in these scrimmages. Like, I don't think that you had your best five offensive linemen all playing like as a unit. So I will say this, like, I think there is potential in the tackles of Champ Westbrooks and Jermaine Mitchell. And so I think if those two can be your day one starting tackles, then I think the interior of the offensive line, I don't want to say takes care of itself, but I think you have enough guys who have been in the system or transferred in or whatever it may be that, like, you can fill that in with the Makuapules and the Wade Heltons and there's a few guys. There's guys I'm forgetting, but like a Makai Stewart potentially. So I'm not going to dive too deep into the interior offensive line. That's like by far the toughest thing to measure as, a fan in a certain angle watching a practice. Like, I don't want to over step on that. So overall, like, team looks good. I don't know how good, right? But, like, I think Dillingham was pretty encouraged with how the team ended spring ball and kind of what they look like at the end of it. And I have no reason to disagree. I think our skill guys, like, you have really good skill guys that can take you far in college football. And you pair that with a defense that we know that Brian Ward is a great defensive coordinator. So you have that, and then you just have the talent that's there. You have the talent that's returning. I don't know. I'm not going to throw out a record prediction or anything, but they didn't look like some horrible woebegone team. They look pretty good, and they look like there's some depth there as well. So, yeah, I'll be excited to watch them in future scrimmages before the season kicks off. All right, before we leave, let's touch on baseball. It has been a very up and down kind of just vibes for ASU baseball. They play tomorrow night against New Mexico State, which is that game will be in Phoenix. ASU baseball is 28-13. The way they've gotten there is pretty frustrating, honestly, but it is what it is, right? Like, the first game you lose to Utah was gross. Even the win, you had to hold on to beat them 14-13, but you did win. And then you beat them 5-2. Losing to U of A, unfortunate, but that individual loss doesn't hurt me too much. This was a horrible game. You were just down by a ton early. You get run, like, losing in BYU to 7 innings. I mean, come on. You kill them the next game, and then you fall down 7-0, but come back to win 12-8. It's just a weird, like, you just don't feel totally great about how they're playing right now. And yet, if I look through all these Big 12 series, 2-1 versus TCU, 2-1 versus Kansas State. You lose a series against West Virginia, 2-1 against Arizona, 2-1 against Utah, 2-1 against BYU. So I just hope they've been able to right the ship a little bit. Landon Hairston isn't hitting quite the same way he was. It would be great if they could just reel off a 4-0 stretch here. You're at 32-13, and I will say, like, D1 baseball has ASU as a 2 seed in the Chapel Hill regional. I think that, like, that's fine for where they are right now as like a 2 seed. I think there's opportunity to climb even higher. They have ASU as one of the lower ranked 2 seeds, 30th. So that's not that great. And again, like the Big 12 is not, I don't want to say it's bad, but it's certainly not this like murderer's row that you're never going to be able to get out of. And like, no, it's not that. And there's opportunity to gain ground. Like someone from the Big 12 is probably going to be a 1 seed. Now, why can't I find West Virginia? Okay, so they have West Virginia as a 2 seed. So there is room for ASU baseball to keep rising in this. And if they go to UCF and win 2 out of 3, that is going to be a big feather in their cap to just rise up the standings and improve. And so Oklahoma State isn't that good. Houston isn't that good. You have some midweeks at Missouri is a weird schedule quirk. And you got to play at 10 a.m. on May 3rd against UCF. That's not ideal. But, you know, I think that overall they've kind of righted the ship while also acknowledging like there's some problems with this team, and it's really hard to like trust most pitchers that aren't Cole Carlone or Cole Klecker, and that's unfortunate. So we'll see how it kind of plays out as the season goes along. They really like I'd have a much different tone if they lost that game on Sunday to BYU, but they didn't, right? They didn't. So you know, they're kind of chugging along, but it would be great if they were just either a high 2 seed or able to sneak into a 1 seed range and host a regional. I don't think that's super unrealistic to request. And hey, you know what? No matter what, like you've taken the series from U of A, which is great as well, even though probably should have won that 4-1, but oh well. All right. Thank you for watching and listening. I'm a little bit loopy today, not feeling quite, I don't know, I feel fine, but just had some weird sentences there, but you know what? It's okay. This is all part of the content game. So, yeah, we'll see how the NFL draft plays out. We'll see if there's any more additions for ASU men's basketball. Keep an eye on ASU baseball season. And then we kind of get to the summer where I don't know what I'm going to do quite as much. I might hit on some big picture topics or maybe just kind of take a break and just kind of refocus before the football season kicks off. But that can be decided at a later date. And until then, thank you for watching and listening. Please like and subscribe on YouTube. Please rate and review on your podcast platform of choice. And as always, go Sun Devils.